The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched for miles in every direction. Lights of 1,000 colors floated in the air, each one representing a different species that had joined the Council over 40,000 years of galactic peace. Ambassador Linda Morrison stood alone at the central platform, feeling very small and very human in this place where empires were made and broken. The single vote. She had been Earth's representative to the Council for 6 years now. 6 years of careful diplomacy, of learning alien customs, of trying to secure humanity's place among the stars. Today, all of that work was about to fall apart. High Arbiter Velthorn towered above her, his body made of living crystal that pulsed with cold blue light. He was ancient beyond human understanding, and he spoke with the authority of 1,200 species behind him. Humanity will withdraw from the Kepler expanse within 90 cycles, Velthorn announced. His voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. This territory has been claimed by the Mendrani Collective, a senior member of this council. Your presence there is a violation of galactic law. Linda kept her face calm, even though her heart was pounding. The Kepler expanse was home to 3 million human colonists, families, children, people who had built their lives on those worlds. High Arbiter, she said. Those colonies have existed for 40 years. The Mendrani showed no interest in that territory until we made it valuable. Surely there can be some negotiation. A sound rippled through the chamber. It took Linda a moment to realize it was laughter. Hundreds of alien species, laughing at the idea that humans could negotiate with the Council. Velthorn's crystal form flickered with what might have been amusement. Ambassador, your species is young. You have been traveling between stars for less than 2 centuries. The Mendrani have been members of this council for 9,000 years. There is nothing to negotiate. He raised one crystalline arm, and a massive holographic display appeared behind him. It showed the council fleet, 17 million warships gathered from 300 different species. The fleet was so vast that it blotted out the stars in the image. If humanity does not comply, Velthorn continued, this fleet will remove your colonies by force. We trust that your species understands the wisdom of cooperation. Linda stared at the display. 17 million ships. Earth's entire navy numbered less than 5,000 vessels. The math was simple and brutal. But Linda Morrison had not spent 20 years in the Marine Corps before becoming a diplomat. She had not survived 3 combat deployments and a dozen hostile negotiations by being easily intimidated. She looked at that impossible fleet, and she made a decision. High Arbiter, she said, her voice carrying across the vast chamber. I will relay your terms to Earth, but I think there are some things you should understand about my species first. She pressed a button on her podium, and the holographic display changed. The council fleet disappeared, replaced by images from human history. This is Thermopylae, Linda said, as the image showed 300 soldiers facing an army of millions. 300 humans held this pass against an empire. They all died. They did not retreat. The image changed. A frozen city, buildings shattered by artillery, soldiers fighting in the ruins. This is Stalingrad. The enemy surrounded this city completely. They bombed it until nothing was left standing. Our soldiers fought in the rubble for 5 months. They did not surrender. Another image. Soldiers raising a flag on a mountain of volcanic rock, bodies scattered around them. This is Iwo Jima. 20,000 humans died taking this island. It measured 8 miles across. They did not stop. Linda turned in a slow circle, meeting the eyes of delegates throughout the chamber. Most of them looked confused. Some looked disturbed. A few, she noticed, looked thoughtful. Your council has existed for 40,000 years, she said. In that time, you have had peace. You have forgotten what war truly means. But humanity has not forgotten. We have been fighting each other for 200,000 years. We have destroyed our own cities, burned our own fields, killed our own brothers and sisters in wars beyond counting. She paused, letting her words sink in. You think that showing us a large fleet will make us afraid? You think that threatening our homes will make us submit? But you do not understand what you are threatening. Linda pointed at the images still floating behind her. When you threaten humanity, you do not face our military. You face every human being alive. Every farmer becomes a soldier. Every factory becomes an arsenal. Every scientist becomes a weapon designer. We do not have a military caste. We are all warriors when we need to be. The chamber had gone completely silent. Even Velthorn's crystal form had stopped pulsing. You have given us 90 cycles, Linda continued. I suggest you use that time to reconsider your position. Because if you come to take our worlds, you will not find colonists waiting for you. You will find something else entirely. She gathered her documents and stepped down from the platform. What will we find? Velthorn asked, his voice uncertain for the first time. Linda stopped and looked back at him. You will find out why humans spent most of their history fighting each other instead of conquering the galaxy. And you will wish very much that you had left us alone. She walked out of the chamber without looking back, in the observation gallery above. Admiral Kevin Brooks had watched the entire exchange. He was a tall man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. Commander Patricia Lane stood beside him, her tablet already filling with reports from Earth. She bought us time, Patricia said quietly. But 90 cycles is not much. Kevin nodded slowly. It is enough. Get me a secure channel to Fleet Command, and wake up the reserve shipyards. All of them. Patricia looked at him sharply. All of them? Sir, some of those facilities haven't been active in decades. Then it is time to reactivate them. Kevin turned away from the viewport, his face hard. The Council thinks humanity fears war. They think we will fold when we see their fleet. They are wrong. He started walking toward the communications center, Patricia hurrying to keep up. What are we going to do, sir? Kevin smiled, but there was no warmth in it. We are going to show them why the galaxy should be grateful that humans spent most of their history fighting each other. We are going to remind them what war really looks like. He stopped at the door and looked back at the council chamber. Where 1,200 species were still trying to understand what had just happened, Emmy Admiral Morrison, he said, Linda's brother. Tell him to start planning. And tell him to plan big. Patricia nodded and hurried away, her mind already racing with the implications. 90 cycles. Roughly 3 months by Earth's calendar. It was not much time to prepare for a war against 17 million ships. But then again, humans had never let impossible odds stop them before. 87 cycles had passed since. The Council delivered its ultimatum. Fleet Commander Thraxis of the Mendrani Collective stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the stars through the main viewport. Behind him, the greatest military force in galactic history waited for his command. 17 million ships. The thought still filled him with pride. No enemy in 40,000 years had faced such overwhelming power. The humans would see this fleet and understand that resistance was pointless. They would surrender their colonies, accept Council authority. And this matter would be resolved without a single shot fired. That was how wars worked. That was how they had always worked, Commander. His sensor officer called out. We are detecting movement at the edge of the system. Thraxis turned from the viewport. The human fleet. Yes, Commander. Initial scans show approximately 3,000 vessels. It's 3,000. Thraxis made a sound that his species used to express amusement. 3,000 against 17 million. The humans were either very brave or very stupid. Open a communication channel, he ordered. Let us offer them a chance to surrender with dignity. The main view screen flickered, and a human face appeared. Male, old by human standards, with gray hair and cold eyes. He wore a uniform covered in metals that Thraxis did not recognize. Council Fleet, the human said. This is Admiral Kevin Brooks of the United Earth Navy. I am giving you one chance to turn around and leave this system. Thraxis stared at the screen for a moment, certain he had misheard. Admiral, you are outnumbered more than 5,000 to 1. Your position cannot be defended. Surrender now, and the Council will show mercy to your people. The human smiled. It was not a friendly expression. Commander, I have studied your wars. All of them. Your entire history of military conflict. Do you know what I found? Thraxis did not answer. I found that you do not understand what war actually is. To you, war is a tool of diplomacy. You gather a large force, you threaten your enemy, and they give you what you want. If they refuse, you fight until one side decides the cost is too high, and then you negotiate. That is not war. That is bargaining with weapons. Your philosophy is irrelevant, Thraxus said. Numbers do not lie. You cannot win this battle, numbers, Kevin repeated. He seemed to find the word amusing. Let me tell you something about human numbers, Commander. In 90 cycles, you gave us time to prepare. Do you know what humans can do in 90 cycles when someone threatens our homes? Before Thraxus could respond, alarms began screaming across the bridge. Commander, the sensor officer shouted, his voice filled with something Thraxus had never heard before, fear. Detecting massive energy signatures? Ships emerging from subspace throughout the system. The tactical display lit up with contacts. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. Then millions. 12 million vessels confirmed, the sensor officer reported. 15 million. 20 million. Commander, they are still coming. Thraxus stared at the display, unable to process what he was seeing. This was impossible. No species could build this many ships in 90 cycles. No species could hide this many ships from Council sensors. No species could mobilize this completely, this quickly. But the display did not lie. Human ships filled the system like stars in the night sky. Dreadnoughts and cruisers and carriers and fighters. More ships than the Council had ever faced in its entire history. 31 million vessels now surrounded the Council fleet on the view screen. Admiral Brooks was still smiling. Let me explain something to you, Commander. When the Council threatened our colonies, we did not debate. We did not form committees. We did not argue about the cost or the risk. Every shipyard on Earth started building. Every factory that could make weapons started producing. Every human who could fly a ship volunteered to crew one. He leaned forward, and his cold eyes seemed to pierce through the screen. He gave us 90 cycles to save our people. In 90 cycles, we've built more ships than your Council has built in 1,000 years. We did this because you threatened our homes. We did this because someone told us to kneel, and humans do not kneel. Thraxus found his voice. This changes nothing. We will still destroy you. Even with these numbers, you cannot match our technology, our experience. But perhaps, Kevin agreed. Perhaps you will win. Perhaps you will destroy every ship we have built and kill every human who serves on them. But I promise you this. If you try, you will lose more than you can afford to lose. You will bleed in ways you have never bled before. And when it is over, win or lose, you will never forget what it cost you to fight humanity. The communication channel closed, leaving Thraxus alone with his thoughts and his impossible tactical display. Around him, his bridge crew was silent. They were looking at him, waiting for orders, but he could see the fear in their eyes. They had expected to intimidate primitives. They had not expected this. Commander, his second officer said quietly, "What are your orders?" Thraxus looked at the display one more time. 31 million human ships. Ships that had been built in 90 cycles by a species that the Council had dismissed as young and weak. Ships crewed by beings who had volunteered to die rather than surrender their homes. For the first time in his 200 years of military service, Thraxus understood that he might have made a terrible mistake. All ships, he said finally, prepare for battle. Launch fighters. Charge all weapons. He turned back to the viewport, watching the human fleet spread across the stars like a wall of steel and fury. And may the ancestors forgive us for what we are about to unleash. On the human flagship Valiant, Commander Patricia Lane stood at her tactical station, watching the Council fleet begin to move into attack formation. Around her, the bridge crew worked with calm efficiency, preparing for the battle that would determine humanity's future. Admiral Brooks stood at the center of the bridge, hands clasped behind his back, watching the enemy fleet with the patience of a predator waiting to strike. Admiral Patricia said, "All fleets report ready. Weapons charged. Fighters standing by." Kevin nodded slowly. "Signal all ships. Today we teach the galaxy a lesson it will never forget. Today we show them why humans are not to be threatened. Today we fight not for conquest or glory, but for our right to exist." He raised one hand, All ships, engage. The Battle of Kepler had begun. The battle began with fire and fury. Commander Patricia Lane watched her tactical display as millions of ships collided in the darkness between stars. Energy weapons lit up the void like lightning in a storm. Missiles streaked through space, leaving trails of light behind them. Ships exploded, their crews dying in seconds. Their sacrifice just one small part of the larger chaos. Patricia had trained her entire life for fleet combat. She had studied the great battles of human history, had run countless simulations, had prepared herself mentally for the reality of war. Nothing had prepared her for this. "Third Fleet, form up on the Valiant," she ordered into her command channel. "We are pushing through to the enemy dreadnoughts. Stay tight and follow my lead." The ships of Third Fleet responded instantly, falling into formation around her vessel. They were a mix of heavy cruisers and destroyers built for speed and firepower rather than defense. In a battle like this, defense was meaningless anyway. The only way to survive was to kill the enemy faster than they could kill you. "Enemy formation at bearing 274, her weapons officer reported. 20 dreadnoughts, heavy armor, supported by approximately 200 smaller vessels. Designate them priority targets," Patricia said. "Signal the Iron Heart and the Fury to cover our flanks. We are going straight through them." The Valiant's engines roared as the ship accelerated toward the enemy. Around her, Third Fleet matched her course, their captains making the same decision she had made. Attack. Always attack. Give the enemy no time to think, no time to regroup, no time to understand what was happening. The Council ships tried to maintain their formation. That was their first mistake. In their wars, formation was everything. Ships stayed in position, supported each other, fought as a single unit. It was organized. It was logical. It was exactly what their tactical computers were designed to counter. Human ships did not fight in formation. They fought like wolves, circling their prey, striking from unexpected angles, retreating only to attack again from a different direction. Their pilots flew with instinct rather than calculation, making decisions faster than any computer could predict. Patricia watched a squad of human fighters weave through the enemy formation, their pilots executing maneuvers that should have been impossible. They were not following any standard attack pattern. They were improvising, adapting, doing whatever it took to survive and kill. "Enemy dreadnought, breaking formation," her sensor officer called out. "It is trying to withdraw." "Do not let it," Patricia ordered. "All ships, pursuit protocol. We do not stop until they cannot fight anymore." The Valiant surged forward, its weapons blazing, its crew working with desperate efficiency. Somewhere behind her, Patricia knew that ships were dying. Human ships, crewed by men and women who had left their families behind to fight this battle. She could not think about that now. She could only focus on the enemy in front of her, on the Council flagship. Fleet Commander Thraxis watched his carefully planned strategy fall apart. The humans were everywhere. They appeared where they should not be, attacked from angles that made no tactical sense, refused to die when every calculation said they should. His officers kept reporting impossible things. Human ships that continued fighting after taking critical damage. Human pilots who rammed their fighters into enemy vessels rather than retreat. Human captains who sacrificed their own ships to protect others. "Commander," his aide said, voice shaking, "we have lost contact with the 7th Division. The 15th Division reports 80% casualties. The 43rd Division is completely destroyed." Thraxis stared at the tactical display. The numbers were clear. His fleet was losing ships at a rate that would mean total destruction within hours. By every rule of war he understood, both sides should have stopped fighting by now. Both sides should have pulled back, counted their losses, opened negotiations, but the humans were not stopping. For every ship they lost, they seemed to fight with greater fury. They were not behaving like a military force. They were behaving like something else entirely, something that had been cornered and was fighting for its life. "Order a full retreat," Thraxis finally said. The words tasted like ash in his mouth. "All vessels, emergency withdrawal. Get us out of this system, Commander, the humans are pursuing." They are matching our retreat vectors. Then tell them we surrender. Thraxus shouted. Tell them whatever they want to hear. Just make them stop. But the humans did not stop. Admiral Kevin Brooks stood on the bridge of the command station, watching the battle unfold across 100 different screens. His face was calm, but his hands were clenched into fists at his sides. Every dot that disappeared from those screens was a ship. Every ship was crewed by humans. Every human was someone's son, someone's daughter, someone's parent, someone's friend. Admiral, his communications officer reported. The Council flagship is signaling surrender. Kevin did not respond immediately. He watched the screens, watching the enemy fleet try to flee, watching his own ships pursue them relentlessly. Admiral, they are surrendering. Should we order our forces to stand down? Kevin finally turned to face his officer. Do you know why the Council thought they could threaten us? The officer shook his head. Because they have forgotten what war means. They think war is about numbers and weapons and strategy. They think war ends when one side asks to stop. They do not understand that war ends when one side can no longer fight. He turned back to the screens. If we let them retreat now, they will rebuild. They will. Convince themselves that they almost won. They will come back in 10 years, or 50, or 100, and they will threaten our children and our grandchildren. We cannot allow that, sir. The casualties. I know the casualties, Kevin said quietly. I know every ship we are losing. I know the names of their captains and the faces of their crews. And I know that if we do not finish this today, their deaths will mean nothing. He straightened his shoulders and spoke into the command channel. All ships, continue the attack. Do not stop until the Council fleet can no longer threaten humanity. Make them understand what they have awakened. The battle raged for 4 more hours. When it finally ended, less than 2 million Council ships remained of the original 17 million. The rest were destroyed or captured, their crews dead or taken prisoner. Humanity had lost nearly 9 million ships. 40% of everything they had built, everyone they had sent, was gone. But they had one. Commander Patricia Lane stood on the observation deck of a captured Council station. Looking out at the field of debris that stretched across the system, her ship, the Valiant, was damaged but still flying. Many of her crew were injured. Many more were dead. She did not feel victorious. She felt exhausted and hollow and old. Admiral Brooks joined her at the viewport. He looked as tired as she felt. We did it, Patricia said quietly. We actually did it. Kevin nodded slowly. Yes, we did. And now the galaxy will never forget what humanity is capable of. Was it worth it? All those lives? Kevin was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. Ask me in 50 years. Ask me when our grandchildren can look at the stars without fear. Then I will know if it was worth it. They stood together in silence, watching the debris field drift slowly through the void, a monument to the day humanity proved that it would never be threatened again. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was the largest gathering in its 40,000-year history. Every member species had sent representatives. Many of them had traveled for weeks to be present in person rather than appearing as holograms. The great chamber was filled with beings of every shape and size. Their attention focused on the single human figure standing at the speaker's platform. Ambassador. Linda Morrison looked different from when she had last addressed this chamber. There were new lines on her face, new gray in her hair, new shadows in her eyes. She had spent the time since the battle visiting hospitals where injured soldiers recovered. She had written letters to families who had lost loved ones. She had attended memorial services for crews who would never come home. The cost of victory was not measured only in ships and statistics. It was measured in empty chairs at dinner tables and children who would grow up without parents. Hi, Arbiter, Linda began, her voice carrying across the vast chamber, members of the Council. We have come here today not to make demands, not to threaten, not to celebrate. We have come to explain. She pressed a control on her podium, and a holographic display appeared behind her. Images of Earth filled the air, cities and farms, families and children, ordinary people living ordinary lives. You believed that humanity would submit to your ultimatum. You believed that a display of military force would make us afraid. You believed that we would abandon our colonies and accept whatever terms you offered because we had no choice. The images shifted, showing the aftermath of the battle. Fields of debris floating through space. Captured council vessels. The faces of alien prisoners being treated in human medical facilities. You were wrong, Linda continued. Not because we are foolish. Not because we do not understand the value of peace, but because you did not understand what you were threatening. She stepped forward, her small human form somehow commanding the attention of 1,200 species. When you threatened our colonies, you did not threaten a government or a military. You threatened mothers and fathers. You threatened children. You threatened everything that makes us human. And when you threaten those things, you do not get diplomats asking for better terms. You get warriors who will fight until they cannot fight anymore. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Many species found this concept disturbing. Their own civilizations had moved past such primitive responses long ago. Wars were fought by professionals, managed by governments, resolved through negotiation. The idea that ordinary citizens would transform into soldiers was alien to them. Your council has existed for 40,000 years without major conflict, Linda said. In that same time, humanity has fought over 14,000 documented wars. We have developed weapons that could destroy our entire species. We have burned our own cities and killed our own people in conflicts over land, resources, beliefs, and sometimes nothing more than pride. She paused, letting the translation systems catch up with her words. You look at that history and see primitives. You see a species that cannot control its violent nature. But you miss the most important lesson that history teaches. Linda turned in a slow circle, meeting the eyes of delegates throughout the chamber. Every one of those wars taught us something. Every battle, every loss, every victory made us better at fighting. For 200,000 years, we practiced on each other. We learned how to fight in every terrain, in every climate, in every condition. We learned how to build weapons and use them. We learned how to inspire soldiers to fight beyond exhaustion, beyond fear, beyond all reasonable hope of survival. She pointed at High Arbiter Velthorn, who stood silent and dim at his position above the chamber. Your species has not fought a real war in 8,000 years. The Mandrani Collective has not faced a true military threat in 12,000 years. Your entire council has forgotten what it means to fight for survival. But humanity never forgot because we never stopped. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the ambient sounds of alien physiology seemed muted. You sent 17 million ships to take our colonies, Linda continued. The most powerful military force in galactic history, and we destroyed it in a single battle because we were willing to pay any price for victory. And you were not. She let those words hang in the air for a long moment. That is the fundamental truth of warfare. It is not about numbers or technology or strategy. It is about will. The side that is willing to sacrifice more, to endure more, to suffer more, is the side that wins. You have forgotten that truth. We never did. High Arbiter Velthorn finally spoke, his crystalline form pulsing with uncertain light. Ambassador Morrison, what do you want from us? What terms will satisfy humanity? Linda smiled, and some of the exhaustion seemed to lift from her face. We want what we wanted from the beginning, a place at the table. Full membership in the Galactic Council with all the rights and responsibilities that brings. We want to be your partners, not your subjects. And if we refuse, then we will build our own table, Linda said simply. And you can spend the next 40,000 years wondering what might have happened if you had made a different choice. The Velkari delegate, a being of shifting shadows who had observed the council for longer than most species had existed, rose from its position. Ambassador Morrison, I have watched this council for a very long time. I have seen species rise and fall. I have seen empires crumble and new civilizations take their place. In all that time, I have never seen anything quite like humanity. Its form shifted, becoming something that might have been a gesture of respect. You frighten me. Your capacity for violence, your willingness to destroy yourselves, your ability to transform your entire civilization into a weapon. These things are terrifying. But they are also, in a strange way, admirable. The Valkyrie turned to address the full council. We made an error. We looked at humanity and saw what we expected to see. A young species that would respond to threats the way all species respond to threats. We did not understand that we were facing something different. Something that has been forged in the fire of constant conflict for longer than some of our civilizations have existed. It turned back to Linda. I will vote for humanity's admission to this council. Not because you defeated us. Not because I fear what you might do if we refuse. I will vote for your admission because I believe the galaxy will be better with you as partners than as enemies. The vote was held 3 hours later. It was unanimous. Humanity became the 1201st member of the Galactic Council. The first species in history to earn that position through military victory rather than diplomatic petition. As Linda Morrison signed the formal treaty of admission, she thought about the millions who had died to make this moment possible. The pilots and soldiers, the engineers and factory workers, the families who had given everything for a future they would never see. A young aide approached her as she finished signing. Ambassador, Admiral Brooks is asking to speak with you. Linda nodded and moved to a private communication terminal. Kevin's face appeared on the screen, tired, but somehow at peace. Congratulations, Linda. You did it. She corrected him. All of us. Kevin nodded slowly. What happens now? Linda looked back at the council chamber, where delegates were already beginning to approach the human section, curious about their new colleagues. Now we show them that we are more than warriors. We show them that the same passion that makes us fight Al so makes us create, explore, dream. We show them that humanity has more to offer than destruction.
8.
Feeling the weight of the future settling onto her shoulders, we prove that we deserve the peace we fought for. Years had passed since the Battle of Kepler. Admiral Kevin Brooks stood on the observation deck of the Memorial station that orbited the battle site. He was 93 years old now, his hair completely white, his body bent with age, but his eyes were still sharp, still clear, still carrying the weight of memories that would never fade. Around him, thousands of visitors moved through the station. They came from hundreds of different species, tall, crystalline Crethians, shadowy Valkyrie, stocky Mendrani, and dozens of others. Humans walked among them, some in uniform, some in civilian clothes, all of them sharing this space with beings who had once been enemies. The memorial station had been built, jointly by humanity and the Council. It floated at the edge of the debris field that still marked the site of the battle, a permanent reminder of what had happened here and what it had cost. Kevin's granddaughter, Lieutenant Nina Brooks, stood beside him in her dress uniform. She had just completed her first year at the Naval Academy, following a family tradition that stretched back through generations. Her eyes were the same color as her grandfather's, and she had inherited his calm, steady presence. "Tell me about it again," she said softly. "Tell me about the moment you knew we would win." Kevin smiled. It was a question she had asked many times before, ever since she was a little girl sitting on his knee. "I've told you that story 100 times. Tell me again." He turned to look out the viewport. At the distant stars and the scattered debris that still caught the light, "It was not during the battle," he said. "It was before. When your great aunt Linda addressed the council for the first time, when she told them that humanity does not fear war." He paused, remembering that day as if it were yesterday. I watched their faces, all those alien delegates. They could not understand what she meant. To them, war was something to be avoided, something that happened when diplomacy failed. A last resort. A failure of civilization. He shook his head slowly. But for humans, war is something different. It is terrible, yes, destructive, costly beyond measure. But it is also something we have lived with for our entire history. Something that has shaped us, taught us, made us who we are. When Linda told them we do not fear war, she was telling them a truth they could not comprehend. Nina looked out at the debris field. Somewhere in that vast expanse of wreckage, ships still drifted. Council ships and human ships alike. monuments to those who had died here. Do you think it will happen again? She asked. Another war like this one? Kevin considered the question carefully before answering. I hope not. I have spent every day since that battle hoping that we taught the galaxy a lesson it will never forget. We joined the council. We became their partners. We helped them develop better ways to resolve conflicts before they become wars. We shared our history, showed them why peace is valuable, precisely because we understand how terrible the alternative can be. He turned to face his granddaughter, placing a hand on her shoulder. But hope is not enough. Training is what matters. Preparation. Making sure that everyone, everywhere, understands what happens when you threaten humanity. Nina nodded slowly. That is why I joined the Navy. That is why I want to serve. I know, Kevin said, and I am proud of you for it. Your grandmother would be proud too if she were still here. They stood in silence for a moment, both thinking of Patricia Lane Brooks, who had died peacefully in her sleep 5 years ago, surrounded by children and grandchildren who existed because she had survived that day, long ago. A group of young Mendrani approached the viewing area. They were students, Kevin realized, probably on a school trip to learn about the war their ancestors had fought and lost. Their teacher, an older Mendrani with the markings of a veteran, guided them to a position near the viewport. One of the young Mendrani looked at Kevin with curiosity. Excuse me, sir. Are you the human admiral from the battle? The one from the historical records? Kevin smiled. I am. My name is Kevin Brooks. The young Mendrani's eyes widened. In their species, elders who had participated in significant historical events were treated with great respect. May I ask you a question, Admiral? Of course. The young Mendrani hesitated, then spoke carefully. In our histories, we are taught that humanity won because you had more ships. But my grandfather was a soldier in that battle. He survived, and he told me something different. He said that numbers did not matter. He said that humans fought like nothing he had ever seen, like you did not care about dying. Kevin nodded slowly. Your grandfather was wise. He understood something that the strategists and generals did not. Numbers only matter if both sides are fighting the same kind of war. But we were not fighting the same kind of war. I do not understand. Kevin gestured at the debris field outside the viewport. Your fleet came here expecting us to behave rationally, to calculate costs and benefits, to surrender when the odds were against us. That is how wars had always worked in this galaxy. That is what your commanders were trained to expect. He paused, gathering his thoughts. But humans do not think that way. When you threaten our homes, our families, our right to exist, we do not calculate. We fight not because we think we can win, but because surrender is not in our nature. Because dying on our feet is better than living on our knees. The young Mendrani was silent, processing this information. Its teacher stepped forward. Admiral Brooks, may I add something? Kevin nodded. I was there that day, the teacher said. I served on a cruiser in the 7th Division. We were among the first to engage your forces. I remember thinking, as I watched your ships attack, that you were all insane. You flew directly into our weapons, taking losses that no sane commander would accept. I could not understand why. The teacher's voice was quiet, reflective. But I understand now. You were not insane. You were fighting for something more important than survival. You were fighting for your right to be free. And that is something worth dying for. Kevin met the veteran's eyes, and for a moment, two old soldiers shared an understanding that transcended species and history. That is why we built this memorial together, Kevin said finally. Not to celebrate victory or mourn defeat, but to remember what war really costs, and to hope that no one will ever have to pay that price again. Nina watched her grandfather as he spoke with the Mendrani visitors. She thought about everything he had taught her, everything their family had sacrificed to give humanity a future among the stars. Later, as they walked back through the memorial station, Nina asked one more question. Grandfather, if you could go back and change things, would you? Would you choose peace instead of war? Kevin stopped walking and looked at her with those sharp, ancient eyes. I would choose whatever I had to choose to protect my people. That is what your great-aunt Linda understood when she stood before the council. That is what every human who crewed those ships understood when they volunteered to fight. We did not want war. We wanted peace. But we wanted peace on our terms, as free people, not as subjects. He put his arm around her shoulders as they continued walking. The galaxy made an error, Nina. They thought humans fear war. They learn better. And as long as we remember what we are capable of, as long as we pass that knowledge down to our children and our children's children, we will never have to teach that lesson again. Outside the viewport, the stars burned cold and eternal. The debris field drifted slowly through the void, a monument to the day humanity announced itself to the universe, not with words or diplomacy, but with fire and iron and an unbreakable will. It was not the legacy Kevin would have chosen. But it was a legacy he was proud of, because it meant that his granddaughter, her children, and all the generations yet to come would live free. That was worth everything. Every sacrifice, every loss, every ship that burned, and every soldier who fell. It was, in the end, the most human thing of all.